Hi everyone, here we are again, Woodworking Wisdom, and today's a Q&A session. I have briefly, well not briefly, but I've sort of given a theme to start us off from one of your questions, I think now probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago. The theme was how to use a ring tool. So that's where we're going to start. But in the meantime, think about any questions that you're burning to ask, whether that's sharpening, whether it's angles, whether it's sanding, finishing, anything like that. Just ask the question and we'll do our very, very best to answer it. If we can't answer it, then we're going to ask you to email us in so we can answer you privately afterwards when we can find the answers out, or the solutions to potential problems if you have any, or just something you just wanted to ask. So let's start straight away. I've got a ring tool here. We're going to look at a few similarities between the ring tool and a few of the modern equivalents that have come along recently. So ring tool's quite an old design. Jace, can you just go to number 2? We've got Jason on the cameras, by the way, and we've got Ben on questions today. So pop to number 2 there, please. There we are. There's my ring tool, so you can see why it's called a ring tool. So we've got 2 angles on this one. So we've got a 90-degree cutting edge top surface. That's going to be our bulk removal edge. And then we've got a little chamfered edge here. This is our fine finishing edge. So we can use both of those surfaces. The timber that I've got is a piece of my lovely fan palm. So the Riviera palm that we get down here in the southwest of the UK. Really, really nice to turn. It's semi-wet. What I mean, it's not soaking wet. It hasn't just come down. It's been down for a while now. But it's still wet in the core. So we've got quite a lot of moisture still in there. Okay, so that's what we're going to start with. I haven't done anything bar just sort of roughed it down to a round. It was actually, but beginning of the day, it was quite a large piece, but I've just cut them in half. I've made a bowl already just to practice for our session, and then we're going to prep on this one. I want to say it's soft. Once it dries, it's not that soft, to be quite honest. It's sort of more of an ashen texture and density, but when wet, it's almost like a cheese. It's it's a very hard cheese to turn. It's really quite soft. But no, now it's not too bad. Ben, we got our first question.
So good afternoon, everyone. I've got a question from Eric here. He said it's difficult to know what hollowing tool to buy with so many to choose from. For a beginner, what is a good all-round hollowing tool? Good all-round
hollower, yeah. No, there are loads on the market, to be quite honest. Whether it's things like the Revolution from Crown, whether it's the Proformer from Woodcut, whether it's some of the scraping hollows. They've all got their own place. When I've shaped the outside of this, we're going to look at a little bit of hollowing, so we'll go over that with you. There are definite differences between them. Obviously, cost is a big one as well, but whether you want to make shavings or whether you want to make chips, and there's a difference in type of hollow form you make. Open hollow forms, then you can make shavings because the shavings are going to come out easily. If you're doing a very enclosed hollow form, though, with tiny little opening, you maybe want chips that you can pour out. So you think, you got to think about the tool for the right job, and also size of pot that you want to make or size of bowl. That's going to dictate on the length of handle, the size of hollowing tool that you use. So there's so many different factors. Yes, Ben.
So Eric's putting again, hollowing the vase with a small opening, but I think you just answered that one. So we've got a question from Dewey Shed. What's the best angle for a bowl gouge?
But it depends who you ask. If to be quite honest, the angle that I use in here is 55 degrees. It's a good all-rounder. However, if you're going very deep in a hollow form, let's say this one, for instance. So this has it's a very deep compared to its opening. So I wouldn't be able to get down that far before I'm starting to hit on the other edge. Let me just give you a demonstration of that one. So my 55-degree bevel angle, if I'm going in there, I'll get down so far, about halfway, and then I'm going to start hitting this edge here. So you might want to bring the angle up, say, to a 45 degrees or even a 40, for instance, so you can go down the side a little bit easier. That's fine until you get to the bottom of the bowl, and then you need that flat angle again. So they're very much down to the individual, maybe the tutor that you've had or a demonstrator. If you sort of aim between 40 and 55. I mean, there's in the States at the moment, a 40-40 grind is quite a well-known one that's being championed at the moment. Like I say, I prefer for teaching, certainly for beginners, 55 degrees for me is the way to go on bowls. 45 on spindle gouges, by the way.
And then a question from Roy. Are you using spirit stains straight from the bottle when you're doing flowers, etc.?
Absolutely. Don't dilute them, straight from the bottle. My favorite ones are chestnut at the moment. They're quite bright and vivid colors, if I'm doing primaries, that is. And yeah, straight from the bottle in the airbrush. The reason that I'm going with straight spirit stains is, unlike acrylics, you can leave them in the bottle for weeks or months even. I keep telling you when I'm airbrushing that they've been in there for several months, if not over a year. Where acrylics, you need to clean them out when you're finished. So one use, clean them out, make sure you strip the airbrush down and make sure it's nice and clean. Spirit stains, you don't need to do that as often.
Okay, so we've still got a few questions coming in.
Okay, no problem.
So ring tool, this is a question from Terry. Ring tool should be used on wet wood?
It certainly performs better on wet wood. However, you can use it on dry wood once you've been practiced in it. There's a great turner friend of mine. It's on Instagram. He's known as V Ulf. So his name is Ulf. Look him up, SV Ulf, and he is a champion at the ring tool, and he will make that sing on the inside or on the outside of bowls, even on dry timber. I would practice on wet and then work your way through to drier timbers, definitely. Don't go really hard exotics. It will not work. You want to use more the open grains, so the ashes, the beeches, the sycamores, limes, those sorts of things. This case, palm.
Martin's saying he's bought your signature skew a few months ago, and he's still just getting the knack of it. Would you demonstrate it again?
Funny you should say that. Of course we will demonstrate it. I have the skews beside me. I have some timber ready to go. Once we've done our ring tool, we're going to do a bit of spindle turning. We're going to roll some beads, make some planing cuts, show you what happens when you don't get it quite right as well. See if you recognized any of the noises. So yeah, we're going to play with that one in a moment.
And we've got a question from Panos. When he's using the spindle gouge end grain, the tool frequently catches, throwing the tool at the end. Any reason why that's happening?
It's going to be presentation all the time, and it's going to be the same thing as a bowl gouge, as a skew chisel. I mean, the bevel isn't rubbing, so what you've got is contact with the cutting edge only, and the cutting edge isn't supported. If you think of a hand plane, if you have the blade of the hand plane out too much, it's going to dive into the timber. The bed of the hand plane stops that from happening. The bevel of your tool is the same as the bed of a hand plane. It stops the chisel from catching, from digging in too far. So it'll be a slight adjustment of the tool handle height. Make sure that bevel's rubbing as you start cutting.
And then Martin's asking, can Jason's signature skew be sharpened on a pro edge?
Yes. Your signature skew on the hollow on the top. So no one know then. So the convex.
The reason for the hollows, the diamond file, and to sharpen it to get a micro. The pro edge will tend to give you too much of a flat.
So if you didn't hear that, the pro edge will tend to give you a little bit too much of a flat. So you've got a convex on one side, you've got that hollow on the other, and the hollow's there so you can get a little micro burr with the diamond file. So probably not, we're saying in that case. So one side, yes, and then diamond file on the other. All right, for the minute, we're going to start. We'll make a start. That last question, Jason's skew, can you just email that in as well? And we'll get the man on the case with that one, just to confirm. All right. Okay, so let's just get this into a rough shape. We're going to do like a Chinese rice bowl shape, that sort of thing. And we'll start off with a bowl gouge before we get into any of the hollowing tools. So I've already checked this. I just double check again, make sure we're secure. I'm using a jumble drive on the drive end, and we've got a ring center on the tailstock. So I'm going to create a foot here for the H jaws. And if you don't know, the H jaws are this. They are this. So it's quite a large serrated surface. I'm going to use an internal grip, so I need to measure the diameter of the internal, which I'm going to do now with a set of calipers. We're going to create that foot. The reason I'm doing that is it's a fairly soft timber anyway, so I want to have a good jaw, a good grip. So lay speed to 0, turn the machine on. It's all over the place at the moment because it's a rough turn bit. So turning there at just over 1,000 revs, we'll just take some of the waste away. The nice thing about this, I don't know whether we can see this already on the camera, when you get a little bit of age to it, you get a real distinct line between the outer, the hardwood here and the core. So you get this real sort of soft, creamy inner. And when it's been aged for a little bit, it's almost like a marbling effect that you can get going on. So quite a pretty timber to use. Yes, Ben?
So Bob's asking the proper way to sharpen a ring tool.
Okay, again, you've got a very, well, it depends on who you ask. I follow the master, and Ulf is the master that I follow for this one. You can get little cone sharpening centers. However, you must be really, really careful with those because these are designed to be sharpened on the external. If you sharpen on the internal, there is a brazed area. You can just see it here, and you can take out that brazing, having your tip then fall off the actual steel. So you must be really careful with that. So diamond file, I diamond file the outside of both surfaces, just like we would a pro form, so woodcut pro form, for instance. Diamond file these, no heavy grinding at all, nice fine diamond file. You'll keep that nice and razor edged. Okay, I'll do a bit in a minute.
And Christopher's asking, could you just explain the difference between a bowl gouge and a spindle gouge and what you would use each for?
Okay, so yeah, well, bowl gouges, there's sort of hints in the name there. We generally use a bowl gouge on bowls because it's a stronger tool than a spindle gouge. The reason it's a stronger tool, let's see the best camera to get. This is probably that one up there, Jace. There we are. So this one here, this is my bowl gouge. This is my spindle gouge. Despite the fact that they are made from different steel sizes, they're both in the UK, in the UK, they're known as 3/8 spindle gouges or 10 mil. In the UK, the bowl gouge is measured on its internal flute, spindle gouge on its bar width. Okay. In the US, I believe that the bowl gouge is measured also on its bar width. Okay, so there's one thing to get right straight away. The bowl gouge flute is very deep, but it's fairly narrow for its steel, whereas the spindle gouge is very wide and shallow. So if you were listening to any of Ben's videos on carving gouges, we talk in sweep. The sweep is less on a spindle gouge than it is on the bowl gouge. So you get a lot of strength from a bowl gouge, and they generally are a lot longer because the leverage you need when creating bowls and going a long way from the tool rest. Spindle gouges tend to be ground back more of a 40 to 45, so you can get more detail, roll beads, do coves, that sort of thing. You don't need the strength, so hence the handles and the steels are shorter, and they're more for sort of detail than anything on spindle work generally. Okay, I mean, you can cross over on both, bit of bowl work, bit of spindle work on either. Easier to do on a bowl on spindle than a spindle on bowl work, I would say, though. Just be careful if you're using a spindle gouge on bowl work, they're not as strong. They will snatch and grab and potentially break if you get it wrong. Okay. Yes, Ben.
Okay, so Steve's passing on his thanks. He requested the ring tool demo, so he's really chuffed that you're doing this. And then a few more questions. Nige has asked, he's saying he's a total beginner and needs his first set of chisels. What should he start with?
I used to say 5. I now gone to 6. So if we go, I've got to remember them now. So we got a rough and gouge. So in order of use, rough and gouge, skew chisel, bowl gouge, parting tool, beading and parting tool, and either a round nose scraper or a spindle gouge. Round nose scraper is used quite a lot. It's sort of a go-to tool where you can't get a bowl gouge or a spindle gouge. A round nose will always go to. If you're keen on doing beads and coves with a spindle gouge over a skew chisel, though, go for the spindle gouge instead. In terms of size-wise of each of those tools, depends on the size of the lathe and the projects that you want to do. So if you're doing, a benchtop lathe, I would certainly go with tools with short handles, so the handles don't touch the bed of your lathe. A big chisel like that on a benchtop lathe could cause you problems because you're going to start clouting the bed with the handle. So go for short handles. If you're into miniatures, again, even shorter, smaller tools. If you've got a big lathe for your first lathe, then you're going to have to go for big tools to cope with the things that you can put on it. So, there's lots of variables in there.
And Julie's asking, what grit diamond file did you use?
So I'm using, this one's a fine, so DSF fine, which is 600 mesh. I don't know how that relates to grit on abrasive, but that's a 600 there. And I also use the fine side of the Axminster version here. And it just says fine, but I would guess looking at the diamond, it's about the same, about 600. That's a fine and a coarse on both on the same file there, and that works really nicely.
And then one from Jim B. What's the benefit of a ring tool? It looks very catchy to him.
What's the benefit? The benefits are if you have a ring tool already, if Ulf, for instance, he's been brought up with a ring tool. If I had to say a benefit over other tools, I'm going to struggle to find one, to be quite honest with you. In my preference would be something like a Proform, only because, and that's the big woodcut, but then there's a massive price difference in these sorts of things. That's because I'm doing different projects. The projects that you're going to use a ring tool on would be small hollow forms, small bowls, that sort of stuff, where I'd want to do the bigger hollow form. So for me, the next stage up would be this. So I would tend to go to that one anyway. They're very traditional tools. Certainly in Scandinavia, they were the go-to tools. If I talk about my skew chisel and the splay sort of shape that you get from German turning. The ring tool is a tradition of places like Sweden and Norway and things like that as well. So it's a very traditional tool, and using that type of tool. It just feels nice. It's a nice way of turning to get those older tools working again. You'll see in a minute what I mean by this, because you do get that wonderful shaving coming off. You're also on end grain hollowing. If you use a bowl gouge, you're cutting into the end grain. If you're using something like a hook tool, you're coming out cutting the side grain. So you're actually cutting the wood more sympathetically using a ring tool over a bowl gouge on this orientation of bowl or hollow form. All right, cool. Right, we'll crack on. So we're turning the foot here. So just creating the foot for my H jaws. And with this one, we need it quite deep. So the jaw itself is quite deep. So we're going to make our foot quite deep. Right, just roughing that out with a bowl gouge first. I'm just going to go over the calipers just to see. We're actually nearly there. So I'm just going to bring the tool rest around a little bit. We're going to go flat with a tool, and we're going to use a beading and passing tool just to get us bang on the money. There we go. And then just to make sure, we're just going to tidy up the underside. There we are. And now I'm going to do sort of rough shaping. I'm not going to do the final shape, but we're going to, with a rough shape, I want to go nice traditional. So let's just skim off the uneven surface. It's lovely. As you break through those colors, they really start shining through. Let's go to a nice sharp chisel. So So rub the bevel. It's quite an abrasive timber. Now it's started to dry a little bit. It's really quite hard on that outside surface, and it gets softer the closer I get to the center where the wetter material is. And, you know, all of these forms here that we're doing, I want to rough turn these. So we turn them slightly thicker than we need them, or when they're going to be finished. So turn them nice and thick and then return them once they're dry. This is semi-dry, like I said, so I wouldn't have to leave it that long at all, probably about 6 weeks to 2 months. And this particular timber would have dried for me, especially here in the UK at the moment. We've got some quite hot temperatures. We're coming into our summer, so it's going to dry that quite rapidly. It's not the best time to be rough turning wet timber. If I'm honest, the best time's in the autumn, so it's got the winter to dry slowly and under control, really. But this is dry enough for me to carry on with. Yes, Ben.
So Martin's asking, could you please repeat the ring tool expert site?
Yeah, SV Ulf is his name, and that's not his website. That's on Instagram, so I'm not quite sure what his website is. But Ulf is his first name.
And would a ring tool be better on a pole lathe? It's a question from Terry.
Well, pole lathe tools are all a type of ring tool. I mean, yes, there are skew chisels and things like that on pole lathes. But if you want to turn a bowl on a pole lathe, you use a hook tool. And hook tools are available for powered lathes as well. But if you think of the ring tool and the hook tool is very similar, obviously the hook just being an open form of the ring tool, then yeah, absolutely the same type of chamfer on one side, very polished compared to what we're using here though, because it's more, you're not using that speed to create the cut more, so you want more of a carving chisel, so a polished back end so it slides through that timber nicely. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
And then Terry's asking, what was the timber, please?
So this is Japanese fan palm, so what we call down here in the southwest Riviera palm. See it all over the place. Yes.
A question from Roy. Will any of the automotive carnauba waxes suffice on wood?
It depends what form you can get it, I suppose. We use it here either in solid lump form and put it on with either a buffing wheel or directly onto the work. But that's the solid wax bar. So not with, well, there's occasionally things like beeswax mixed with it for wood turner stick. But as long as there's no nasties mixed in with it, I can't see why not. Try it. Try a spot. You know, don't try it on your best piece, but give it a go. All right. Right. H jaws or chucks going on with the H jaws on. Lovely thing about the, I don't know whether you can see in the camera there, but you've got this really mottled effect. Like any palm, you've got this sort of straws running through it. But on this particular palm, it shows up so much more, especially with this lovely change in color. It's really pretty. This actually, it performs really well if you're using dye. So if you want to stain a piece, especially with primary colors, it works really, really well. Picks up the stain really well. So we're going to just clean that surface up. Yes, Ben.
So a question from Ted is, do you know if the Axminster tool rest system is comparable with the Robert Sorby system?
Yes. We have a thumbs up. Yes. So they will screw together. Yeah. We have a thumbs up. So yes. Taurus out the way. I'm going to bring the Taurus back in a minute. I just want to clean this surface up first. Lathe speed to 0. I'm going to turn the machine back on. I want to clean up that surface. I'm going to do it with a bowl gouge. We can do it with the ring tool. The only reason that I'm not doing it here is because this has been on my workshop floor for about 2 years. And it's picked up all sorts of sand, grit, and things like that. So I don't want to blunt that tool. So we're just going to go over it with the bowl gouge. But then I will skim the surface to show you that it can be done. So side grain, it's where the timber wants to be cut. What I'm doing now is I'm lining up the bevel. So the bevel's now running parallel with the face. I'm pushing up the length of the tool. and that sends that gouge forward. There we are. Now, what a ring tool doesn't cope with is a center pith, okay, or a center, any form of center that's there. So what we have to do is drill that out. Again, I don't know whether you can see that timber. It's really mottled. It's like a marbling. It's lovely. So what I'm going to do is drill that out first, and then, like I would with a regular hollowing tool, and then we're going to compare them. I want to compare hollowers, show you the similarities. So let's put a drill. I've got a 12 mil drill bit over there. We're just going to shove that down, make a little bit of a hole. I would do this with any, if you're doing any hollow form, especially going into end grain. It's quite important that you don't give a reason for the chisel, whatever you're using, to pick up in the center. Let's a little bit of masking tape. Yes, Ben.
So Panis is wanting to ask a quick question on finishes. Why does he always get a sticky finish when using either the Liberon or chestnut finishing oils?
The reason is you're putting too much on and not allowing it to dry in between coats. So the best way to do finishing oil, and try this tonight if you're in the workshop. So you put your first coat on. Once you put your first coat on, as long as it's not dripping with oil, turn your lathe speed down to 0, turn the machine on, and turn it on at the lowest speed. I tend to try and do it about 50 to 100 revs. And then start using a fine abrasive, 600, 400 if you don't have 600. Sand it in until it starts to drag on you. Once that happens, burnish with shavings and then buff with tissue. Leave that to dry overnight, so 24 hours. Once you've done that, a little bit, again, just a very light touch. Don't brush it on this time, but use a rag just to wipe it on. Go through the same process, burnish off, buff. And then 3 to 4 times, and that'll be fine. If you let it pool on the surface or you don't allow it to dry in between, you'll always have a sticky surface.
And then Terry's asking, where did you get the timber from?
The timber, so this particular one was a friend's, it's taken out a friend's garden. My brother-in-law is a handyman, landscape gardener, so I get a lot from him as well. Right place, right time. But I've never gone searching for it. It's always come to me. It's quite a difficult timber to convert because it's very woolly on the outside. You've got to get through that wool, and don't use a bandsaw or chainsaw because it'll just clog them up straight away. I just hatchet it off. So get all that wool off the outside. It's like a husk on the outside, and then you've got the raw timber on the inside. So by the time you've taken that husk away, it's halved in size. But a good sized tree, you can still get sort of 8 to 10 inch diameter pieces.
Benjamin's asking, should you always leave a bowl blank to dry after roughing out? Can he use a moisture detector after roughing out to check they are dry enough?
Yes, absolutely. I tend to just go by a bit of experience and time. So these are a couple of bowls that have been roughed out. So if you go, if you look at that one, you can see how thick that outer edge is, and that's been drying now, probably getting on for just over the year, and it started to move really, really well. And in fact, some of them I've started finishing now, so they've gone. This is ash, by the way. So you know, those are ready to go, and if it's a hollow form, I don't mind a bit of movement either. So they can be semi-wet when I sort of finish turning them. The same with this sort of stuff. You got a natural edge. You can turn it a little bit before it's dry, let it move. It's absolutely fine. If you're doing something more intricate, or not so intricate, but maybe say a fruit bowl with a design on it, then you'll want it to be dry before you turn it to minimize that drying. But that's the only way. If you imagine trying to dry a bowl blank that depth and trying to keep it whole without splitting, it will be impossible. It will split. It would take years to dry for a start, but it would split. It's quite important that you rough turn to eliminate that splitting. Seal the ends up, so the end grain on both sides, do that. And like I say, about 1.5 years, most timbers. Ash is a bit of an anomaly, so it'll dry a bit quicker. Yes, Ben?
So a question from Maria in Wales. What drives and or chucks would you use for long, thin spindle work, for example, wands?
Drives or chucks. So I would tend to go ring centers. I quite like the ring centers. Ring centers, pro drives. Let's have a look now. Ring centers. This is a ring center here. This one. So literally, as its name suggests, has a ring, and you can get these in all sizes. Pro drives. These with the little spurs on the outside. You're going to have a little bit of waste on either end. If you wanted to turn the end of the one, then support it in the tailstock, how about this? What about going for a multi-head, for instance, and have this little inverted cone? Well, that's quite a nice one for doing bores and like you said, holding the ends of a finished piece, for instance. But these multi-heads, there's 6 different heads. That comes off. There are 6 different heads. He's stuck on there at the moment. 6 different heads. That's one of them. You can get 90-degree points, 60-degree points. You can get little pin tips. But yeah, that's quite a nice one. Little multi-head. It's on a bearing, so it runs in the tailstock really nicely. Yes, Ben.
So a couple more questions. First one from Terry. Would you put sanding sealer on the wet bowl before you leave it to finish drying out?
Not sanding sealer. I would tend to go with something like a PVA, an N-seal, some sort of wax maybe, old tin of paint, as long as it's a non-porous paint. You're trying to seal the grain, you see. I know sanding sealer suggests that, but you need to seal it from too much or too quick moisture loss and too much heat. So I would something that's water proof, almost waxes, paints, those sorts of things. N-seal is like a latex, a liquid latex. PVA, you get PVA that you add to cement and plaster. You know, paint that onto the outside, brilliant, and that'll do the job. Or old tins of glue, that's a PVA glue, you know, that sort of thing.
And then Christopher's asking, can you describe the proper way to use oil in the sanding process? Are you adding oil between grits or only using oil at the final grit? So
only oil at the final grit. So do all your sanding normally. Then you brush on your first coat, sand that in with a fine abrasive, 400 to 600 grit. Then let that, or then burnish and buff. Then let that dry 24 hours of overnight. Then reapply with a tissue or rag. Okay, just a fine coat, burnish, buff, leave. Reapply, burnish, buff, leave. About 12 to 24 hours, depending on the weather conditions, should be enough. 3 coats usually is a really, really nice finish.
And then John's asking, which size pro drive would be ideal to buy first?
Oh, it depends on the type of work you do. If you're into your bigger spindles, big piece. If you're into small thing, go for the smaller one. It is as simple as that.
And Terry's asking, Colwin, when you cut down a tree, what do you use to seal the end grain of the timber?
Again, it's the same thing. PVA, N-seal. N-seal is a product from Chestnut. PVA it comes in the form of either glue or cement and additives for plaster, that sort of thing. Old tins of paint, that sort of thing as well. So all those products just to seal it up. It's quite important. If you don't seal the end grain, you will get splitting. And I'm not saying you won't get splitting if you seal, but you will certainly minimize the splitting by far. The best thing, of course, is to take out some of the stress. That's why we rough turn. Okay, so we're going to crack on. So I'm going to drill this hole. I've marked the length that I need to drill. So let's just charge this one in. Just keep that swath clear. You don't want anything binding up, otherwise you'll end up causing a lot of heat, and the shavings will end up coming out glowing red. So be quite careful. There we are. There's to our depth. Now I'll get rid of the tailstock. Let's take the drill chuck out. Get rid of that one. Okay, so we're going to play with the ring tool. So I need to give the tool a little bit of space. So space from the surface here to where the top of the tool rest is. So if we put the tool on, if I have the tool rest right up, then the ring's going to be obviously touching the top of the tool rest. So I need to give some distance so I can actually have the bar on the tool rest. Now, we're going to use the roughing side. So the roughing side is the 90 degrees, so the flat-sided side, as opposed to the chamfered side, which is the fine cut. So let's just take some of that waste away, and then we're going to look at how the woodcut, the profile then works as well, and how similar they actually are. So speed at the moment, I'm running there at 1200 revs. We're going to start with that, and you're going to start at a 45-degree angle. Okay, let's go up a little bit with my tool rest. So just slightly above center. I like to have the handle higher. Just gives me a bit more control. Okay, so there's my 45 degrees, and I'm going to start just by pulling back this way. So remember what we want to do. We want to cut that side grain. Okay, so we've got the side grain being cut there. So this outside edge, really different. The density difference between the dry timber on the outside and the softer inner core is really quite dramatic. I can feel it, the extra pressure on me. So you can see there, I've kept that 45 all the way. The further up I bring it, the bigger the cut will be, to the point where it can become uncontrollable. Get to finishing up, so the cleaning cuts, you go back over to the chamfered side, and it's a much finer cut, and I'm tickling the side grain. And I'm actually using the bevel of that chamfer to rub the timber. Then we go back to the roughing side. I'm going to stop there just for a minute, just to show you now the comparison between that and my Proform. I don't know whether that's helped or that look a bit better. A little bit of light on the subject there. So let's just go to a Proform. So this is my woodcut. Okay. Now the similarities here, this is probably more like a hook tool because you've got an upper guard. Okay. That's your limiter, I guess, that I was talking about earlier. And then you've got the blade underneath. But look at this side. It's completely hooked. Okay. So we don't rub the bevel in a traditional way. The limiter is the brass bit on the top there, or bronze bit on the top. But look at this, how similar the cut is when we start cutting. We cut in the same way. We start from center and we work back out. You can see those ribbons coming off the bottom of the tool. Doing the same thing, let's clear some shaving so you can see a bit more. Doing the same thing, cutting in exactly the same way as the ring tool. So they're, even though they are completely different tools, they work on the same basis. And I would say, the traditional ring tool has a heavy influence on this design. And this is, if you get into hollow forms, this is exactly the same sort of thing that you're going to be doing on the inside of a hollow form, but you just won't see it because it's going to be an enclosed form. There we are. Let's have a quick look. We'll tidy that up in a minute. Yes, Ben.
So Grander P has just said he's just started turning. What wood would you use to practice with?
Anything that's free is the best advice I can give you. Softer the better. Softwoods work. So I'm going to use this in a minute. This is a bit of joinery grade pine, so a bit of redwood. This is beautiful. It works really nicely. Relatively cheap. No timber's that cheap anymore, but relatively cheap. And quite forgiving as well. But any of the softer timbers, if you're in the it doesn't really matter where you are. Beech, ash, sycamore, maple, oak. A lot of these timber air dried are nice. As soon as you get them kiln dried, they get a bit hard. But the air dried version is quite nice to practice on. Lime again is another one. Elm, all of those timbers. Yes, Ben.
So we've got a couple of people asking how to sharpen the tool again. I think you've been through that.
I'll just quickly demonstrate it as well, just to make sure. So just be a little bit careful when cleaning these up. They can bite, especially if they're freshly sharpened. I tend to veer away from the inside because the inside has the braze section, and you can end up taking the ring off if you take too much of that away. So like I would one of those tools, get yourself in a position. Think about the side of the hook that's going to do most of the cutting. In my case, and doing what I'm doing here, it's the left-hand side. So I'm going to just hold that. Put my finger, let's get in the camera. Put my finger on the tip of the tool. Use that as a brace. I'm looking down the tool, and I'm doing a twisting sharpen. I mean, to start with, it can be quite a tricky little sharpen, but you do get used to it. So that's the 90-degree side. Keep going. Then the same on the chamfered side. You can't see much. I'm looking down the join between the tool and the diamond card. So I've always said it, keep it sharp. Don't let it go blunt before you sharpen it, because it just means it's a lot more work. So every now and again, just give it a touch up. Make sure it's sharp, and you'll be away. I'm going to bring the tool rest in a bit closer now because we've taken a lot of that away. Yes, Ben?
So Panos is asking, are there other uses for the ring tool apart from bowl hollowing?
No, traditionally they were used to do things like making cups, egg cups, drinking vessels, that sort of stuff. Generally through birch, generally wet timber on end grain. The reason a ring tool is because you start in the center and bring the cut out to cut the side grain. You think about traditional bowl gouges, you're always cutting downwards. Ring tools, you're cutting this way, so it's especially good on end grain work.
And a question from Mr. Zombie. I need to turn a small drawer handle, 50 mil long, 40 mil wide, but the only lathes in the works machine shop are large 1960s Woodworking industrial lathes.
Yeah.
Are lathes that size too big for something so small?
Nope. Not at all. Not at all. It might feel a little bit laborious because you've got heavy tool rests, heavy saddles to move around, but they're absolutely fine to do it. You'll need to go a little bit faster. So I would say that sort of thing, you're probably looking at minimum of around about 1500. I would probably want to be turning that at about 18 to 2000. So if you can get your lathe to that speed, do all your normal safety checks. So if you're going to be turning at speed, but absolutely not. You can turn small things on a big lathe. Try and do it the other way around. It's a little bit trickier. Big things on a small lathe don't always work that well.
And Ian's saying he finds using the roughing side at 3 o'clock removes the center, although he still likes the drill as a depth gauge. What do you think?
The roughing gouge?
The roughing side of the ring tool.
Oh, to hollow out. Okay. I've never tried that. I'll be honest with you. I've always gone straight for the drill bit. But if you think that works, or if you've tried it and it works, perfect. Yeah, I tend to drill personally, but there.
And Martin's asking, regarding the hollowing out, would the same apply to a round carbide tipped chisel?
Yeah. Now the trouble is, and I've said this before, I am in no way a scraping snob, not at all, because scrapers have their use. The trouble is, and I've got Axminster ones here and stuff. Brilliant as they are scrapers. They tear the grain. They don't cut the grain. A ring tool, a wood cut, they're all cutting tools, so you get a much cleaner finish. And also, in most cases, you'll have a bevel rubbing, so you get a clean line as opposed to an undulating one. So that, for me, I mean, I'll show you a cut with one of these. We've got it here. It's in my hand. So I'm literally guiding that with my hand rather than relying on a bevel. And the finish, if you've done a piece of turning and you've got a finish which is nicely glazed, your bevel's rubbing. If you've got a fairly matte finish, your bevel's not generally rubbing, or you're scraping. Okay, and it just means a little bit longer in the sanding process.
And Nigel's saying he's just picked a bit of birch. Is this any good for a starter? And is linseed oil any good for anything?
Smells lovely, linseed oil. Birch is wonderful. It turns really, really nicely. If you get birch down by the root system, you get these wonderful markings, really dark flecks in them. And so, yes, absolutely, birch is really, really nice to turn. What was the second part of that question?
Linseed, any good?
Oh, linseed.
He's just picked a bit of birch.
Yeah, so linseed oil, it's a lovely oil. The trouble is with linseed oil, it's as nice as it smells, it can sour, and it takes an age to dry. Linseed oil, there's no natural drying agents in it. If you do use something like a finishing oil, food safe oil, they dry within about 24 hours, so you're fine to go for it. Lemon oils are the same. Lemon oils take a little bit longer to dry, so any of those citrus type oils, something with a drying agent in it isn't like that. It'll dry a bit quicker. I know food safe oil doesn't have a drying agent in it, but it does dry quickly if you use the same technique I was talking about earlier. So sand it in well, burnish and buff.
And Mike's asking, has Colwin got any books for beginners on the market?
Not at the moment. I've got some project plans out there. Pop to my website or go to my Etsy store. You'll see those. There's a one on fruit at the moment, and mainly the Christmas plans, which we are working more on at the moment as well. So have a look on those two platforms. Okay, right. I think let's just tidy the inside of that up, and then we're going to go on to some spindle work. We haven't got a huge amount of time left, so this is going to be a rough turn piece. And very, very quick to hollow. So just very quickly, we'll get that one out. I'm going to do a little bit of spindle work for you as well. Wonderful colors that you're coming from that. Now, it's damp. I'm going to need to leave that probably another 6 weeks for that to dry properly, and then I can turn it nice and thin. This one will be, I'll have a color on it, but something sympathetic. It won't disguise the grain at all. It'll be transparent, and they just look nice, colored and glazed afterwards, almost sort of like Japanese rice bowl style. So I hope that's got your questions on ring tools. Okay, the ring tools. Any more questions? You know where we are. Email them in, and we will all look at them and answer them. Okay, so that's the ring tool. Very similar, like I say, to the Proform. Okay. Right, going on to spindle work, and I've sort of preempted this one because again we had a few questions actually a few weeks ago about some spindle work and using the skew chisel again. Whether it doesn't matter whose skew you use, whether they're signature skews like mine and Jason's, whether they're standard skews, oval skews, round skews, they all pose certain problems for beginners. and hardened time served turners, unless you do spindle work, unless you use skew chisels regularly, they're going to catch you out every now and again. All of us get caught out. There's certain things we do as a rule, certain things you can do when practice that you might not, that I wouldn't teach a beginner, for instance. One of those key things with a skew chisel is when you start using a skew and rolling beads, we always teach of the using the heel point to roll a bead. When you've practiced for a while, you don't have to use the heel point. You can use the main cutting edge and roll your bead over, and that will give you a very glazed, crisp bead. However, try and do that right at the beginning, you're going to run into problems. So I'm going to teach you or show you how to use the heel point, and we'll do a few little practice sessions on that one as well. So let's I better center up properly. This would be, let's say it's a little table leg. I've done this many times for you, I think. Well, certainly many times for lots of wood turning clubs and demonstrations and things. So just center up, use the bradawl just to get a little center point. Let's use a pro drive. We've been talking about them. And in the tailstock, I use a ring center. We go for the 25 Pro and the little ring center on this side. Decent length of tool rest. So this is the robust. This is the 14-inch robust. Tool rest height high, because I want to start with the skew chisel. Just going to adjust a couple of things. There we are. I can get the whole thing in there. I'm going to put a pencil line up first. So I've got a square behind me here. I'm just going to pretend that we're creating a pummel. Pummel is the square section for your mortise if you're making table legs, or the square section top and bottom of the staircase spindle. I need to create a little cut, so let's go straight to the skew. Lay speed to 0 to turn the machine on. Now, you can just see the line. I'm not going to go too close with my finger. You can just see the line there with that camera view. So I want to cut to my right-hand side, so the far side of that line. And I'm going to go about ½ an inch away from it first. And I'm going to use what is the long point of the skew. So upright, make my initial cut. Then I'm going to slightly tilt the heel over towards the pummel and start making a series of chamfered cuts. If it looks like we're getting close to that pencil mark, but I'm not a solid timber, then what I'll need to do is just tilt the other way and take a little bit of waste material away. Then I can go deeper straight away. Okay, just going to up the speed. So I'm up now to 1500 revs. So carry on with the chamfer cut. There, I'm going to stop there just to show you. So my pencil line was my marker as to where to stop. You can see the corners there. Okay, and if you're doing staircases or you're doing table legs, you're going to mark all your legs out first to make sure you stop at the same place. So now we're going to quickly rough down. Now, if we follow the rules, the tool rest needs to be low now. So for roughing and bowl gouge work, you have the tool rest below center, skew chisels, and beading and parting tools above center. And if you're having problems with a skew and you didn't know why, that will be the first reason. You need to get your tool rest up high. So let's rough down. Because I've created that firewall, I'm safe to do this, knowing that if we get any splitting, it's not going to go into the square pummel. There we are. So let's just have a quick look again, and I'm going to make an adjustment. Yes, Ben.
So Christopher's asking, would you demo the non-heel edge for rolling the bead? He says he's mastered the corner, but it's about 50-50 on the edge. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah,
why.
sure. No problem. Let's just clean this up first. Let me get a catch going, though. I just want to talk about catches, and then we'll roll a bead. So tool rest is low. It needs to be high. This is why it needs to be high. If when we're planing, we're using generally, not all the time, but 90% of the time, you want to be using the long point high, so facing upwards. Using the bottom half to do our planing cut, so basically the supported half, and run along the tool rest. However, if you go above that halfway point toward the long point, that's where you're going to run into problems. And this is what happens. So we cut too high, and you can be ready for the bang. And that will happen every single time. So to avoid that, we want to bring the tool up. That's why we have the tool rest high. Rub the bevel. Listen for the noise of the bevel rubbing. Then raise the handle until you see dust on that bottom half. You can just make it out there. Then once you've got that going, you can run along the tool rest. Same the other way, so I'm going to turn over, rub the bevel, lift the handle, there's the cut. When you're happy with that, then you can do your roughing cut both directions so we can push forward. You can pull back. Always end cutting forward though. I like to have the bevel trailing. It just gives me a better finish. Then back, forward. Now look at the difference that we have from a roughing cut to a nice finishing cut. How clean that timber is. These were those catches that we had earlier. But how clean that finish is. You got to think about your sanding then. You know, if you're sanding a finish like that as opposed to a torn up surface, you're going to sand much quicker. You're going to get through that sanding. So let's do one of those beads. Bead cut first, so long point. And then we're going to run over. So there's the point. Now you'll know the point's working if you have a bird line. And if you're just starting out, that's what you're looking for all the way down. If you practice with that, then you can bring the actual cutting edge into play, and listen to how smooth that sound is then. And what you'll end up with, if you do that, is a much cleaner finish. I don't know whether you can just see that shine. I'll do it. It's an easy, if I do it this longer curve here, you'll see it a little bit better. Just take the bulk out. So there we are. So we're using that bottom half. I'm almost upright with the cutting edge. So basically it's planing the bead as opposed to, so planing the same way you would this top surface of the bead instead of using that corner tip. Yes, Ben.
So a question from Terry. Is there any movement on the robust is there any movement on the robust system for a smaller banjo stems?
Yes, we're doing 5/8 stems at the moment. So for the craft benchtop machines, so robust tool rests for those machines. Maybe Sam, could you drag out some of the links to those smaller tool rest stems, please?
And then Kevin's asking, was the bevel rubbing during that cut? But I think that was when you were using the roughing gouge.
Oh, no bevel rubbing on the roughing gouge. I mean, you can rub the bevel on a roughing gouge. It'll give you a nice finish. But the general rule for a roughing gouge is it's a bit of a brute. It's designed to take the material away quickly. So just rip it out. So we generally don't use a roughing gouge bevel. All right, just nice quick bulk removal tool. All right, look, time is escaping, so I'm just going to finish this off for you. We'll go for a few tools. Let's go for a slightly smaller tool just to round these beads over. We'll go for a little spindle. Do a nice deep cove. So we're just with a spindle gouge, we're using it in a different way than a bowl gouge. Spindle gouge is a twist, or a bowl gouge is a handle movement more. That one's nearly done. We're just going to drop the tool rest. I'm going to go to a bowl gouge now to show you the difference. So there we were twisting. Go for a nice small 1/4-inch bowl gouge. And this is all about the handle movement. So my flute is not going to twist. I'm going to keep it in one place and just move and pivot the handle. But as I pivot the handle, I'm pushing up the length of the tool. So now the bevel is rubbing all the way and creating my nice shiny surface. The same way as a skew. There we go. Back to the roughing gouge. So what we're doing is we're using all of these tools for their jobs, for different reasons, for different things. So roughing gouge, got a bulk remove. So we want to take a large section of this center spindle away. We don't need it to be clean. There we are. So there's the rough surface. So now we need to clean up. We've got our rough surface. So we go back to a skew. We use the skew for the reason it was made. It wasn't used as a bulk removal tool. It's used as a fine finishing tool and a detail tool. Oh, let's just go a little bit closer. Just notice that I'm stopping the lathe when I want to adjust things here. We've got a nasty old corner going around. As confident as you may be, you will get caught out if you don't stop the machine, eventually anyway. So, 45. All that nice clean cut. Now, when I get down to this area here, I'm just going to bring the handle round to present the cutting edge more of an upright way. And the reason I'm doing that is if I don't, I'll hit the other side of that curve. A little bit more and we're done. Yeah. A little bit of a lump in the middle that needs to disappear. And there's a little table leg practice piece. Guys, Ben, have we got any more questions before I sign off for the day? We're all good. Guys, don't forget, if you enjoy what we're doing here, please subscribe to our channel. Obviously, hit the thumbs up for us. It helps us and encourages us to do more of these, and share with as many friends and people that you know might enjoy it as well. So I hope that's answered a few of your questions, guys. I think tomorrow we're starting an epic build. Jason and Craig are going to be starting their, how do I say it? Adirondack outdoor chair. So join us again tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and happy turning. Bye-bye.